Hello! Today we continue the conversation with Gleb Vladimirovich Nosovsky about Evangelical Jerusalem, the ancient fortress of Yeros. Gleb Vladimirovich, good evening.
Good evening.
Gleb Vladimirovich, in your books, you provide images of ancient geographical maps on which the fortress of Yeros is marked. Please tell us more about this.
Let me show you some old maps right now. This is the Bosporus as it appears. How did it all happen, according to our reconstruction? Here is the Bosporus, and on the left is the Black Sea. This is the northern end of the Bosporus, and here is the southern end. This is the Sea of Marmara, and this is the Golden Horn. Istanbul is located here. The Golden Horn is a fracture in the rocky terrain. The shores of the Golden Horn are completely steep. Therefore, a ship with a deep draft can enter the Golden Horn and approach the shore. In other words, it is very deep here. In this sense, the Golden Horn is an ideal place, an ideal harbor for large ships that cannot approach the shore near Yeros. The shore here is not precipitous. Here, it gradually slopes into the water, but here precipitously. But on the other hand, where Constantinople, the present-day Istanbul, is located, there are no water sources. They exist, but they are very scarce. For such a large city that was built here, there was not enough local water. Therefore, when Constantinople was built, they constructed an aqueduct from Belgrade Forest. It starts approximately from here, and the length of this aqueduct is about 20 kilometers. Only then could a city with a large population that required a lot of fresh water exist there. Therefore, in ancient times, this location for a city was inconvenient. Moreover, the strait is very wide, and without guns, it cannot be swept with fire. Although there is a tiny island in the middle, it is still useless. In ancient times, when people were shooting arrows, it could not be shot through. Here, Istanbul is built today, and it is its Asian part. In ancient times, such a city could not have obstructed the path of ships in this place. For an ancient city, this place was inconvenient. It was inconvenient due to the lack of water and the excessively wide strait. And this is the most convenient place for the location of the ancient capital. When, according to our reconstruction, the capital was relocated from Egypt to the Bosporus, it was originally placed here, where Yeros is located today. This is the ancient Troy, the ancient Evangelical Jerusalem, the ancient Tsargrad. At that time, there were no deep draft sea and ocean vessels. There were small boats, flat-bottomed river boats were easily pulled ashore here. The Bosporus is quite narrow at this location, and even a rock protrudes from the water's surface in the middle. So, at this point, the Bosporus could have been blocked with a chain. The city was built on both shores. Here it is depicted on both shores. The main city with the Kremlin is here, and a part was here. In the middle, a rock protrudes from the water's surface. Today, there is a buoy to prevent ships from colliding with it, but in the past, A chain was hung from here to the middle and from the middle to the other shore. It was at this point that the Bosporus was blocked, not here, where it is slightly narrower. However, due to the rock protruding here, it was possible to divide it into two sections. It is a bit closer to this shore. Mountain Beykoz is nearby, where the tomb of Jesus is located. This is Golgotha or Calvary. So, Jerusalem, Golgotha, and on the other shore, another part of Jerusalem, while the Bosporus was blocked here. This is how they controlled the passage of ships, which were still small boats at that time. Large boats were the ships of that time. They traveled between the Black Sea, the Sea of Marmara, and the Mediterranean Sea. There were enough water sources here to sustain a certain population, not as large as in later Istanbul, but still. This is where the original capital was located after the relocation from Egypt to the Bosporus. Jerusalem, the city of David, the one associated with the ancient Roman Empire. Another map. Here, it is also clearly visible that the old capital, Yeros, was placed in this narrow spot, and Golgotha is nearby. Here is Yeros, and here is Golgotha depicted as a mountain. Another map. Again, we see this location. It is the narrowest point, and Yeros is precisely located there. Here it is depicted. By the way, it is depicted on both shores. You see? On the Asian bank as well. In other words, initially, the main city was located on the Asian side, and in Constantinople, the main city is on the European side. However, like present-day Istanbul, it was situated on both sides. Istanbul has both European and Asian parts. It's just that the main part is in Europe. The palace and all the main monuments are located there. In the ancient city of Yeros, the ancient Jerusalem, its main part was located on the Asian side, and there was also a part on the European side. So dictates the area, because in Istanbul, the European part is most convenient for the royal palace, and here, the Asian part is most convenient for the royal palace and the city. It is located on a high bank, and it was easier to build fortifications there. Here it is beautifully marked. Do you see? The narrow spot. It is clearly emphasized as a narrow spot. This is Yeros. This is the European part of Yeros. And this is the nearby tomb of Jesus. This is how it looked, and on the right is the Black Sea. So, it is very close to the mouth of the Bosporus, where it meets the Black Sea. Another map. Here it is clearly visible that this is the narrow spot, and a rock arises that allows for a shorter distance and hanging a chain. Do you see what is written here? The Mountain of Giants. This is the tomb of Jesus on the Mountain of Giants. And next to it is this fortress. This is Jerusalem Yeros. And this is Golgotha or the Mountain of Giants. There was also a settlement opposite Yeros. This is how they stretched the chain, considering that there is a rock here where the chain was attached. As a result, the chain consisted of two parts. I think it is already clear that this place was indeed the most convenient for the founding of the original capital. The original capital of these lands had to be placed here. This was the most suitable place to block the Bosporus and control all the boats and ships that sailed through it. This was the most suitable place to build these impregnable fortifications. Moreover, there was water here. There was no need to build an aqueduct. This is where this location was. But when Emperor Constantine, also known as Dmitry Donskoy, moved the capital here from Rome, also known as Yaroslavl or Old Rome, he did not relocate it to this place, which had already become inconvenient at that time, because large ships and guns had appeared. Large ships appeared, and this place became inconvenient. And the space here is not that vast. They built the city near the Golden Horn, where huge ships could enter and dock. The drawbacks of this place, primarily the lack of water, were addressed by constructing an aqueduct. This was done at the next level, at a higher stage of development. And since guns had already been invented, they could easily control this passage, despite its width. Here's another old map. There are many of them, but I believe it's necessary to show them all so that you can visualize how it looked. This paired point catches the eye, where two capes are located. This is Yeros. Here it is very clearly visible. A beautiful map. Here's Istanbul, Constantinople. Behind it is the Golden Horn, next to the steep walls. This is the new capital, New Rome, which Constantine built not far from ancient Troy. He wanted to build the city precisely on the site of ancient Troy, but he was advised against because that place was not very convenient, and he built the city here. Historians say that ancient Troy was located at the Dardanelles, so one needs to go there, through the Sea of Marmara, closer to the Mediterranean Sea. There, Schliemann found some ruins, similar to many other ruins found there, as they are abundant. He declared it to be Troy. This confusion arose precisely because historians were puzzled. They knew that Constantine, also known as Dmitry Donskoy according to the new chronology, built New Rome not far from Troy. But where is this Troy? So, they imagined that it was not on the Bosporus but at the Dardanelles. The Bosporus connects the Sea of Marmara with the Black Sea. The Sea of Marmara is at the bottom, and it connects to the Mediterranean Sea through the Dardanelles. Historians sent Troy there on paper, and there they allegedly found it with the help of Schliemann and his forged golden treasure that he found there. Gold, of course, sharply increased in value. So, it was just gold, but then it turned into the gold of Troy. Thus, Schliemann's project had a commercial aspect as well. Here, it is very clear that the most convenient place for the ancient capital is the narrowest part of the Bosporus. And these are two capes, two mountains. The tomb of Yusha is marked. Let's zoom in and take a closer look at the tomb of Jesus. This is the mountain of Hercules. It's probably not very clear. This is Golgotha. And this city is the fortress of Yeros. Another map. Yeros is depicted very clearly, and here is Mountain Golgotha. Do you see? They are very close. Just as depicted in icons and old paintings. Finally, the last map. It is quite modern, but nevertheless, You see? Yeros. Even the walls are drawn here. It's a good map. The fortifications are depicted, and the upper city is shown with 2 towers. This is, in fact, the Kremlin. It is enclosed by its walls. From there, the walls descend towards the Bosporus. Here, along the Bosporus, everything was also settled. Old small ships and boats could dock here. There were no docks for large sea or ocean ships, but the small ships of that time could dock. Back then, there were no ships venturing into high sea. Navigation was coastal, along the shore. Only in specific cases, when wind and currents were favorable, could they cross the sea along predetermined routes. These were rare occurrences, and generally, navigation was coastal. And you see? There were numerous fortifications here. On the other side were the outskirts of this city. Part of this city was on the European side. Where I'm pointing with the mouse, the chain was stretched, and there is a stone that emerges on the surface of the Bosporus. Today, a buoy is attached to prevent ships from hitting. We made such a discovery that made many things fall into place, and many things became clear from what previously raised questions for us. I must say that the picture has unexpectedly straightened out. Unexpectedly, because we did not anticipate it. We thought that if there was an ancient city somewhere in the vicinity of Constantinople, nothing of it would remain. But we certainly did not expect such impressive remnants, with such a significant name. It is astonishing that historians did not see any of this. It is surprising that they let all of this pass by and constructed their own fantastic narratives. They searched for Troy somewhere, at the Dardanelles. They crafted some silly Trojan horse out of boards. They depicted our history as an obvious fairy tale. It is still presented as an obvious fairy tale in our textbooks. For some reason, they do not want to see the truth. And the truth, in general, is not deeply concealed. It is not so difficult to reveal all of this. We have unearthed it. How many of us are there? 2 or 3 people, and we have unearthed all of this in 2 or 3 decades. But there are thousands of historians. They could have discovered all of this long ago, but they do not want to. They still cannot make sense of chronology because they lack the education to understand something natural scientific, and chronology is a natural scientific discipline. It requires knowledge of scientific methods. At least, they could have learned, no big deal, but they don't want to. That's why we had to take on all of this ourselves, and we did what we could. Of course, there is still a lot left. For historians, there is a good deal of work still outstanding. There are many uncertainties, much digging to be done, and a lot that still needs exploration. Therefore, I appeal to young historians with advice that before you lies a field of fascinating activity. You have the potential to accomplish so much in this field. It is just beginning.
In the Multimedia Museum of the New Chronology, in the hall that tells the story of the rise of the Second Empire, there are multimedia maps of the empire, a module that describes the ruling Komnenos dynasty. Augmented reality is used. allowing visitors to see what the fortress of Yeros looked like during the reign of Andronikos Christ and how the rulers of the empire controlled the movement of ships on the Bosporus. Gleb Vladimirovich, thank you very much for this presentation and for the interesting conversation.
You're welcome.
In our next video, Anatoly Timofeyevich Fomenko will talk about the application of his proprietary method of form codes for studying biographies of historical figures. We look forward to seeing you in a week on the channel of the Multimedia Museum of the New Chronology.